Last night, we got a bunch of massive performances from some of the league's best big men, with Karl-Anthony Towns getting 46 points despite a loss to the Chicago Bulls, Victor Wembanyama getting a career-high 50-point game, and Giannis Antetokounmpo falling just short of a 60-point performance with 59, 14, and 7 in a close win against the Detroit Pistons, which was just Milwaukee's 4th on the year. I was originally planning on just talking about Victor's game, but then just more awesome performances kept happening. So let's talk about a truly special night of NBA basketball, one of the first classic days of the season to this point. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. If you are over on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience, check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So there were actually a couple of other impressive performances from this night of basketball. I think the main thing that would stand out to me is that there was also a 40-piece from Jordan Poole in the same game with Victor, because the Wizards and Spurs were playing each other. But I wanted to highlight these three performances specifically because I feel like there is some interesting narrative stuff to discuss with these teams and these players that I would like to use these performances as a way to arrive to. So the first player I want to talk about out of the gate is Victor Wembanyama, because he has been a source of interesting discourse so far this year. He has had a very rough start, but as of late things have been turning around, and I was actually planning on making a video that was something along the lines of, hey guys, I think Victor Wembanyama is going to be fine because he's been pretty good his last few days. I had to end up deleting all the thumbnails for that because we had to change that. This is a much bigger deal than just being fine. This was the first 50-point game for someone who is presumably going to have a lot of them, for someone who is going to be in the GOAT conversation. So a 50-piece is huge, or at least theoretically will be in the GOAT conversation. For Karl-Anthony Towns, the fact that they lost this game, despite the fact that he played as well as he did, is interesting to me because I don't think they lost. I know he's had some other 40 pieces this season, maybe 2 even. And as of right now, the Knicks look kind of sus, and a big part of that has been Karl-Anthony Towns' defense. Now, his offense has been amazing. In fact, I would argue he's looked better offensively than he has in years in Minnesota, like probably since his second or third season there, when he was like 26 and 12 or whatever the hell those averages were. Like his true peak offensively, I think he is arguably in a similar place right now. They are looking great on offense and terrible on defense. So I wanted to examine that specifically with Kat, look at how he went off in this game, and more specifically look at some of his defensive blunders and determine whether or not those are issues that can be overcome or not. And then finally with Giannis, it's this carrying thing. Like, do you really need this big of a performance out of your best player in order to beat the Detroit fucking Pistons? Like, the Pistons have been good this year, don't get me wrong, at least relative, good being relative to what we expected of them and relative to what they were last year. But man, it really shouldn't take a game like this in order for them to be good. And here we are, and that's exactly the case. So with that said, let's first delve into Victor Wembanyama's performance. The main thing that I am looking at here is shot diet. How does Wemby get the shots that he does? Does he get them within the flow of the offense? Is he forcing them? What types of shots from where? This has been a huge source of discourse with him. Like a lot of people who are mad with his three-point volume. Obviously, this is not going to be a game that changes your mind on that, as he went 8 for 16 from 3. I mean, maybe it'll change your mind because the shots were actually going in, but if you don't like your 7'4" dude taking a shitload of threes, you're probably not going to feel great about the game where he got 16 up. But anyways, I want to talk about his shot diet, and then after we review the footage, we're going to get into why I think most of the stuff that the Spurs are doing with Wemby is perfectly fine and people are overreacting. This play right here, simple catch and shoot top of the key, takes it from fairly deep. Not too concerned about the depth of it though, just because of the height that he has. That ends up being a really pretty standard, comfortable jumper for him. Right here, we have the inverted pick and roll with Stephon Castle. I do want to quickly point out that Castle has looked awesome recently, and I genuinely think he has a chance of being, I don't know if I want to say the best player in this draft, because it really could just be anybody, but because it could be anybody, it actually wouldn't shock me if it was him, because he's looked really good. But an inverted pick and roll with Castle, ends up faking this pull up here into the pass for the layup. So that's really cool, being able to see him operate that way. Sets up the screen for Blake Wesley and then just drives inside for the and one out of the pick and roll. That's exactly the type of offense that I want to see out of my 7-footer. But right here, Chris Paul dances around the screen a little bit and Victor Wembanyama just gets this easy pick and pop. Here we are again. This time he just simply gets open because Valanciunas is too slow-footed. And what I find interesting to this point, he has not taken a single pull-up three-pointer. Now, I was planning on making the same reactionary Victor Wembanyama video that plenty of other NBA YouTubers did because, you know, easy views. I completely understand it. I was going to try and cash him in myself. Just purely from a scheduling conflict standpoint, it didn't happen for that reason. Otherwise, it would have. And I went and watched the Rockets games that he's played this year, but specifically because there was, I don't know if it was a back-to-back, but he played them back-to-back. I don't know if it was literally sequentially days, but he had a great performance against them and then a bad performance against them. Maybe I'm flipping it, but one way or the other, I wanted to see what the difference was. And truthfully, the major difference was just it seemed like his team was looking to get him shots more in spots where he could get easy offense to where he wasn't just creating on the perimeter for himself. And in this game for Victor, a very, very large majority of his buckets ended up being assisted. And I think that's more the direction that you want to see him go. On this play right here, gets a ghost screen from Wesley. Gets just enough to get Valanciunas trailing behind him, and then there's just nobody who's going to be able to interrupt that. This play right here, this is some shit where it's just like, all analysis aside, that's something that only he can do. This play right here, another one where it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? Contest that? Good luck. This play, this is essentially what I want a majority of Victor's creation to look like. If he's not able to just get the drive, using his length where there's just no way you're going to get a legitimate contest on this shot, and then he's just able to get that to rattle in, that being a basic source of offense for him would be fantastic. And then right here, you see Alexander Sarr jumping on this pump fake. That's exactly why you want him to have that three-point threat, because that is 2 easy points the moment he puts that ball on the floor. Inbound right here, just a basic screen from Harrison Barnes, and even though Sarr didn't do the worst job fighting through it, when you consider Victor's release point, there's just like, again, you have no shot at all of bothering Victor in any capacity there. This time he's trailing in semi-transition and just pulls it over Valanciunas. That was obviously a heat check. Again, though, we have not seen a single pull-up three. Huge steal right there. Really, really nice attack, and it gets a assist for him as well. This one, he shoots the long 2 over Corey Kispert. That's one where I'm like, I'm actually perfectly okay if you turn that into a 3 because it was a deep enough 2-pointer. This play right here, this isn't a bucket for Wemby. I just wanted to illustrate scoring gravity for a second here, because Victor in this pick and roll, Sarr makes the mistake of sticking with Chris, who has picked up his dribble. He's going to try and rotate over and try and interfere with the pass, but there's no one between him and the basket. Keyshawn George, or I believe that's how you say his name, he rotates over off of Harrison Barnes just to put a body in between Wemby and the basket. And now Harrison Barnes is wide the fuck open over here in this corner, and he gets the catch and shoot 3-pointer to drop. I remember that being a pretty crucial basket in the game. So yeah, Victor has a 50-piece. He does so on extremely good efficiency, 75.8% true shooting, 8 for 16 from the 3-point line. Also worth mentioning that he only scored 6 points at the free throw line. Otherwise, this was 44 points of pure buckets. So let's get down to the shot diet discourse, specifically the 3-point shooting. Now, the big thing that stood out to me in this game was that there was a lot of catch and shooting, which is something I far prefer to a lot of the types of threes that I was seeing him do thus far in this season, where he is taking like these, tween hezzy splash, step back, but no splash, just a tween green hezzy step back brick. He shot 40% on pull-up threes last year, so I'm absolutely not saying that I don't want that to be a part of his game. I think the shooting is fine for the most part because he has displayed an ability to be very good at it. Specifically, the ability to get such an open look at any point, like when you consider how clean all of those 3-point looks were, like across the board, those were looks that got virtually no contest, because from where his release point is, he can just get a clean look pretty much at any point. So you want him to be able to hit that shot. You want him to have that in the arsenal. You know, when you had Alexander Sarr jumping at that pump fake earlier, that's exactly why you want that. You get the defense to respect that shot, you get the defense to anticipate that shot, and suddenly you're opening the floor up for yourself to get even more easy offense more frequently. A lot of people have been critical of him not being used straight up as a traditional big man, and don't get me wrong, I think that Victor Wembanyama has the potential to be one of the 5 most devastating rim runners in the history of this game. Like, just in terms of pure scoring and the paint prowess, he could be maybe even the GOAT in that category because he has a ridiculous catch radius. He can put up shots that are entirely uncontestable, and especially if he ends up having a jump shot that you genuinely have to be very concerned with, then there is just really nothing you can do to prevent this guy from getting to the rim like crazy. And I recall, that breakout game versus the Phoenix Suns, I believe it was a 40-point game. That was the first one where he looked like really what he was supposed to, and they got a win versus the Suns. It was a lot of alley-oops. It was a lot of very simply, this dude's way too fucking tall. Do something about it. You won't. I think that will be the staple of Wemby's game. That will be the foundation of Wemby's game, and the three-point shooting will be something that more supplements his ability to get in the paint rather than that being more so the thing that he does. On top of that, there's an in-between game aspect that he is very clearly going to be capable of. I've seen him use it quite a bit super effectively. Whenever he does manage to get cut off from that basket, again, there was that fadeaway over Sarr from earlier. So as a whole, I'm okay with him doing this three-point shooting stuff because it's not like what he's doing right now is what he's going to be doing in the future. I think if we're taking this idea of Victor can be this ultimate Swiss Army knife, he can do anything and everything, well, then you should try to do anything and everything with him at this stage right now to determine what is actually his best anything and everything. So I'm perfectly okay with it. And something else that I really want to point out, and I hate to be a hater, but I gotta do it. I think Jeremy Sohan being out is the reason why this game happened. I think it's the reason why he's been playing a lot better recently, because frankly, Jeremy Sohan has been pretty good. Give him credit, but he also has been doing too much. And not because he's not necessarily good enough to get some of the shot volume that he has, but that if it's coming as a detraction away from Wemby, then yeah, he's not good enough. You should be giving your shots to your best player, specifically the one that you are trying to develop really a whole lot for your future. So Victor, in the 6 games that he played with Sohan technically logged 7, but he got hurt in 12 minutes, so I'm just counting the 6 full games. Jeremy Sohan averaged 14.7 field goal attempts to Wemby's 14.8. They were taking the same amount of shots. That is unacceptable across the board. And if you look, those last 6 games where Wemby hasn't been playing with Sohan, he's averaged 26.5 points per game. Before that, with Sohan, 18 points per game. On substantially worse shooting from 3 and the field at that. A lot more offense that was coming in the flow, a lot less him just trying to get his shot up because he's like, hey, I'm Victor fucking Wembanyama, I should be shooting the ball. It actually feels like the team has been looking for him more, and that has been the through line for pretty much all of Victor Wembanyama's struggles. What does this ultimately come back around to? The answer is almost always the team is just not getting him the ball the right way. And I think that's something that will be mitigated with time. And for now, best to just develop his creating ability given that circumstance. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Victor Wembanyama. I'm going to make a larger video about him in general down the line, especially if this keeps up, if maybe some more concerns do come up. Either way, I am going to be pretty consistently updating my thoughts on Victor Wembanyama because he's the most fun player to watch in the NBA right now to me. With that said, let's move on to Karl-Anthony Towns. And on this front, I feel a little bit bad because we're mostly going to be skewing negative here. The Knicks end up losing this game. What exactly is that about? We need to look at Karl-Anthony Towns' defense as well as his offense, because unfortunately he has allowed a 91% shooting efficiency in the restricted area thus far, which is so bad that it almost seems fake. I will say, I don't actually have a lot to analyze from Cat in this game on either end of the floor because of this game specifically, because there really was not a lot of super unique Cat offense. This was a lot of the standard Cat offense. And then on the defensive end of the floor, I felt like the Chicago Bulls did not put a lot of pressure on the rim. And for the most part, New York's perimeter defenders did a pretty good job of not putting Cat in bad situations, where I think from basically what I've been hearing otherwise, they've kind of put him on an island in a couple of instances, a lot of that to be blamed on Mikal Bridges, but the point being, not getting as much from this as we did the Victor stuff. Anyways, let's move on. Let's get to Cat. Look at his footage versus the Chicago Bulls. All right, we have Cat 46 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 steals versus the Bulls. Here is his offense. I broke the highlights down into separate categories. So here he is on offense. Cat's offensive game can be broken down into a couple of categories, really. It's just like the pick and pop 3, the trailing 3, occasionally a pick and roll, and then like driving, attacking off of a catch. That's most of what he does, and then he occasionally posts up, and that's pretty much exclusively what you're getting from him in this game. Still highlighted a good amount of this, but there's virtually none of this that ultimately ends up being too surprising. Right here, an excellently ran pick and roll. The Bulls just have no kind of rim protection available. Here, the and one drive, Cat has a tendency to get some really ugly ass drives off. I was thinking of Corey Maggette, who is nicknamed Bad Porn for being a good driver, but ultimately his penetration being super ugly. There are a lot of instances like that with Cat, and occasionally it ends up sucking where he is just off balance and not hitting the shots, but also many times he is super off balance and hits the shot anyways. A lot of drives to focus on with Cat here. On this play right here, he fakes as though he's going to set up a handoff with Jalen Brunson here, and then he just gets by Jalen Smith for a sweeping hook and one. Pick and pop here with Bridges, loses Dalen Terry, and then drives in for that slam. Just not a lot of people getting in the way. And then Cat shoots the 3 over Vucevic right there, has the mismatch on Zach LaVine, takes that in for that ugly ass drive for the and one. Another not great drive, but the stop and go was certainly nice right there. But that's where the offense was from a majority. Very little first half offense, and in the second half of the game is where he got a lot of his stuff going, and that was a big part of a comeback that the Knicks made. So gotta contextualize that. Not only was this a good Karl-Anthony Towns game in general, but like his good game happened at the opportune time to even make this close to begin with. Unfortunately, the Knicks were not able to close this out, and a big part of that was that Victor did have, I gotta stop saying Victor, I'm talking about Cat. And a big part of that was, unfortunately, that Cat did have his defensive lapses. So on this possession right here, he's not way out of position here, but it definitely looks like Vucevic more or less has this lane, and OG has to step up in order to interrupt that, which results in a wide open 3 catch and shoot for Patrick Williams. Here, Vucevic just doesn't even really see Cat. That was an extremely easy in-rhythm hook shot. This one, if we want to do the blame game, we want to point out Mikal Bridges fucking up here. I don't know how he got killed on this screen this hard. It's pretty embarrassing how bad he got killed on this screen. And OG has to step up to face the Kobe White drive. And while this was definitely a blown assignment on Mikal, at the same time, I got to admit, This contest from Cat is pretty underwhelming. He is not very athletic, and I think that is something that I feel goes undermentioned about Cat, and it affects him on both ends of the floor. I think the reason why his drives can end up being so ugly is because of how not that athletic he is, because he often ends up dragging his feet, ends up not jumping all that high. That stuff is primarily, to me, a matter of him just not being that great of an athlete. And this rim protection here, like just sitting there and watching it happen, it was because at this point, with his knees bent, it's not like he has some huge burst to get in front of that ball to affect the shot. No, the possession's already over because he was not in a position to leap to contest that shot. Here, spin move for Vucevic, just, doesn't really even see him. This move is, unfortunately, he gets cooked right here because Vooch just loses him on that pump fake, and then that is an easy 2 points right there. So that's not too bad, especially by contrast to a lot of the shit that I've been hearing about the guy. But there's definitely a lot of defense in those sequences that you would prefer to see something different. You would prefer Mitchell Robinson on the other end in those instances. So the question I have is, are we going to reach a point where we just don't think Cat can play the 5 because of his limitations on the defensive end? Like, to me, I think the big reason why he's looked better offensively than he has in years is because he is playing that center position and he's being utilized in a more versatile way rather than shooing him in as almost strictly a stretch big. They have really done a good job to use him in pick and roll, to have him as a driver, to have him in post-ups. Like, he's getting the most diverse shot diet I've seen from him in quite a while. However, I don't know how easily you can do that if he's sharing the floor with the likes of Mitchell Robinson. So I don't know. But at the same time, if he continues to just be a complete disaster protecting the basket, then you're going to have to go with that. You can't just have no rim protection. That's not going to work. Now, Mikal Bridges has been a disappointing defender, and as a result, Cat has found himself in a position that he shouldn't regularly, because it is heavily relied upon in this defensive scheme that the perimeter defenders are on top of their shit. So if Mikal Bridges is not going to be on top of his shit, then Cat is going to find himself in trouble a lot. So I have my concerns about New York's defense. I have my concerns about Cat's ability to play the 5 in the long term. I'm not going to say anything definitive right now, but I just want to put it out there. There's some reason to be concerned. Cat was not the main reason they lost this game. I would chalk it up mostly to bad shooting from Jalen Brunson. Brunson did end up hitting back-to-back clutch buckets in the fourth quarter after Cat got injured. However, it was a little bit too little too late. And if he was just feeling it from the onset, we probably would have never gotten to this deficit, and it would have been a pretty easy win for the Knicks otherwise. Let's get to last but not least, the 59-point game from Giannis. One more important piece of context that I neglected to mention, this is also a no Dame game, and on top of that, a no Bobby Portis game. So in terms of offensive options that are on the floor beyond Giannis, they're fairly limited. But I do think that some of the conversation, and to be fair, I've been doing this exactly myself, with the conversation around the Bucks has been about how Dame and Giannis don't play all that well together, and all of that is true, and I do think that is ultimately their largest issue. But something that also stands out rather significantly is how limited offensively the rest of their personnel is after you get beyond their top 2 players. And Bobby Portis is at least ostensibly a scorer, but he has not been a very good one this season. So yeah, just bear that in mind. This is, even more of a context for a carry job than the Bucks would normally otherwise have. But you will see, especially in the first half, how bad the offense was for a lot of Milwaukee's players beyond Giannis. In fact, in the first quarter, Giannis had 22 points, and his teammates had 2. Brook Lopez hit 2 free throws. He was the only one who made a shot in the first quarter. Bear that in mind for all of this. A big part of the game also was that Giannis was hitting a bunch of jump shots, like a comical amount of jump shots that probably does not happen more often than not, which means they don't win this game more often than not. So I'm going to make a point to highlight specifically a bunch of bad possessions from his teammates. This first one is a baseline pull-up from Taurean Prince. I wasn't able to find a clip where these plays correspond perfectly, but he goes to this pull-up, which is a very whatever shot, and then Brook Lopez misses the point-blank tip-in. That was essentially the energy that persisted throughout the entire first half of this game. Giannis with the hook shot right there. Here's the drive baseline with the reverse layup. Spin move out of the post on Reed, and that's just bully ball for 2 points right there. This time, the post fadeaway. I'm not kidding. I think Giannis went like 6 for 9 on mid-range jump shots in this game. This shot from this shot from Brook Lopez, rather, there are 12 seconds left on the shot clock, mind you. I regularly find myself furious with some of the shot selection Brook Lopez does. He regularly takes shots that I'm just like, I don't know who you think you are, but you should not be doing that this early into the clock. This play right here is actually one that I find really interesting just from a pure scheme standpoint. Unfortunately, the player that Giannis is setting up in this scheme is fucking Pat Connaughton, who has not been good this year and was not good in this game. But initially, Giannis is the ball handler with Connaughton as the screener, but then immediately he breaks off of that, and then Giannis ends up being the screener and sets up a handoff action, which is a really cool play. I wish they did it for someone who could actually hit the shot, because it takes him a while to line it up and then ends up not having all that much space to get the shot up. Next possession, he throws up this ugly layup over Isaiah Stewart. So the first half of this game was just Giannis doing everything that he can to keep them in it, and as a result, he got a majority of his points in that first half. But in the second half, Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, and Brook Lopez all stepped up. They combined for 37 points in the second half. This play is just a ridiculous fumbling of the ball that I wanted to show you because it was hilarious. This one's coast to coast for Giannis. But in the second half, after the 3 started going in, they were able to not rely so much entirely on Giannis. Right here, Taurean Prince getting a big 3-pointer to take the lead. And on this next possession, I think they got a pretty great look here, because Giannis throws this really excellent no-look pass out to Pat Connaughton, and then Pat Connaughton passes to the open Taurean Prince, who has been hitting his shots this game. Unfortunately, the shot does not go in. However, Giannis dominated overtime. He ended up scoring all but 2 of his team's points in that, and I think this 3-pointer that he walked into was the perfect cherry on top for this game, and to just encapsulate the way this game went for Giannis with this ridiculous celebration. So he hit the 3-pointer. He went like 7 for 10 on mid-range shots. He went 16 for 17 from the free throw line. So from a pure shooting standpoint, which is obviously not something that's meant to be a big staple of Giannis's game, he was just fucking ridiculous in this one. And the fact that you needed that to defeat this Pistons team that is really not a special NBA roster in any means, with your best player and a bunch of very prominent rotational pieces, a bunch of starters, like Dame was the only starter that was missing. Bobby Portis rather is the only major bench piece that was missing. So otherwise, this is your rotation minus your second option. So you should at least, at the bare minimum, look like a far more competent offensive team than this. You can chalk it up to just a poor start because they looked a lot better in the second half, but I don't know. There's not a lot positive to take away from this 59 piece, because this 59 piece should not really be required in this context. But the Milwaukee Bucks are at a point where it is, and I don't really know that it spells too much positive for what things might look like in a different context, in a playoff context. So I've said this a few times now. I'm feeling more and more out on the Milwaukee Bucks. Not to skew this too negative, We got an awesome performance from Victor Wembanyama, and though you do not want your contender to be in the position where your superstar has to carry you the moment that you're 2 men down, it is still fun. It was still awesome to watch Giannis just completely dominate in this game. And I also enjoyed a good amount of Karl-Anthony Towns' offense as well, though I was more focused on his impact on the defensive end. One way or the other, a lot of really awesome performances last night, and I think it is important that we take these moments in and appreciate them, because the regular season does indeed matter. This basketball is very enjoyable to me, so I hope it's enjoyable to you too. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.